Junior cycling is something that is near and dear to my heart. It's fun at times, challenging at times, yet it seems to be rewarding all the time. Now, most of you listening right now are not juniors. So why am I taking a whole episode on this topic? Well, because some of you asked for it. Like many of the topics and questions covered on this podcast, it's from our audience reaching out to learn more about something. Recently, we've had several inquiries about juniors training programs, how to find a good developmental program, and when it's appropriate to start racing. So I'm pretty solid on the coaching and physiology side of things for junior stuff, but the developmental aspect is a much bigger picture. It takes a village to do it right, and a giant part of that village is the parents themselves. It's that family union. Now, the other large part of that village are the directors and coaches that work on these programs, getting the athletes to the races and getting them the support that they need when it matters most. I couldn't think of any better village people to help answer these questions than the ones I work with on the DC Devo Race Academy. So I have recorded a podcast with them ahead of time. Their names are Chris Hardee Sr., Justin Mauch, and Ryan McKinney. I recorded this ahead of time, and then I did this intro just afterwards because I didn't know exactly what I was going to get. When I recorded with them, you'll see that they are just a mix of amazing people all together, and we went a little long. The goal is to kind of like shape it down so it's not going to be super long. The end product, I'm not too sure what it is right now as I read this intro to you, but here's a few things that, and a few reasons why I think that this podcast and this episode is so important. Because number one, kids are the future generation of the sport, and we want to see them flourish. If you have kids, it's good to know the options and opportunities out there for programs and proper development in this sport. Now, even if you don't have kids, you may learn a thing or two if these juniors show up on your group ride or you start racing with them at some local race. And lastly, at least the way I coach juniors up until they're around 17 or 18 years old, they look very similar to a time-crunched athlete in terms of their volume per week and their total annual hours. Okay. So we may be able to tease out some training tips for anybody listening to this podcast. So with that being said, let's get into the show. Let's have you learn who these directors are, and let's learn more about junior racing programs. So, Chris, can you tell us how DC Devo Race Academy started and what is Project 2028?
DC Devo started around 2018 as a project of the DC Velo Cycling Club in the DC area, which is one of the largest, most established clubs in the region. And so the idea back in 2018 was to start and support a junior team. DC Velo is generally an established masters club. So for 2 years, it was the DC Velo junior team. And then we wanted to create an identity for the junior racers to have their own team and their own kit, and to mimic some of the established teams, the top teams in the United States, like Hot Tubes, Lux, and others. At the time, we had, just by luck, and through the great grassroots programs in the DC area, like Rock Creek Velo, Baltimore Youth Cycling, we had a group of very talented junior boys at the time. So they formed the first group of DC Velo, which then became DC Devo riders. And we recruited from riders that they knew, generally within the Pennsylvania and DC area, and immediately had significant success at the national level, winning the 15-16 national championships. Then we also had a group of really talented young girls who had grown up in these same programs, so Rock Creek Velo, Catherine Sarkisov, and then her younger sister, Alyssa, Lydia, and then Lydia's brother, Nathan. These are all riders who had grown up training together and racing together. They are extraordinary riders. They've won multiple national championships, cyclocross, road racing, have done extremely well in Europe. They've been consistently on the U.S. national team. And then those riders, just based on how great those riders are, they pulled in riders generally from the national cyclocross teams and programs. And so we've ended up with a team that started focusing on the local boys and has ended up being the top junior girls team in the country. So we right now, I think we have half of the U.S. national team coming from our team and the world's team. So this year we won every national championship. The boys are also incredible. For the boys, there's more of an opportunity for the 17 and 18 boys. There are other programs like Hot Tubes, EF Cycling. We have relationships with those teams. We're not proprietary about our riders. We've had riders who are 15, 16 boys that come through our program, and then they go to EF, like Jacob Hines from Baltimore. Luca went to Hot Tubes, and we don't mind that because those teams have more resources to support European racing for the boys than we do. We do that for the girls, and that's the national and international focus is really a focus for us on the girls program, but we support the boys just as well. So that's the origin. It was these established, well-resourced masters team in this area looking to create a national level platform for the top regional junior cyclists, which is then expanded to be more of a national program, particularly on the girls' side.
I want to say thanks everybody for joining us. Can we just go quick around the horn of who we have on this call? And that's Ryan McKinney, Justin Mauch, and Chris Hardee. And Chris, because I'm starting with you on the first question, just make a quick intro of who you are, what your role is on the team, and what your day job is.
Yeah, my name's Chris Hardee. I'm one of the managers along with Ryan, and I guess Justin, what are you, director sportif? The three of us run the team, and Ryan and I were involved in starting the team. Even Ryan before me, I think I joined a year after he did. I have, along with all these guys, a long background in competitive cycling. From back in the 90s, I was a Cat 1 cyclist and won a lot of races. And my son became a competitive cyclist and raced at a very high level, raced in Europe, and was one of the early riders on the team. And he's left the team and he's in college, but I've stayed involved in the program.
All right, Mr. McKinney.
Hey, yeah, I'm Mr. McKinney, and for my day job, I am a middle school science teacher, but I am all in on cycling and have been since I was 13 years old. And way back then, the mentors that helped me kind of navigate this very outside of the norm sport in the United States were just people that changed my life. And this program kind of came out of that, wanting to give back and be a mentor and help guide junior cyclists through what can sometimes be just an absolutely, confusing and disorienting experience, even though they have a passion for the sport. So give them kind of a North Star, if you will.
So yeah, we have an attorney, we've got a school teacher, and now we got Mr. Mauch.
Yeah, so Justin Mauch. I grew up in the DC area racing. I think my first race I was 11, first USAC race. Fell in love with it, raced more and more until, graduating juniors, racing some domestically and internationally. Had a great time. Decided to move on past the sport, and Ryan called me one day and was like, hey, we're getting this team rolling and kind of want to take it to the next level and bring some more help in. And I thought that would be a really cool opportunity to share my experiences, kind of help, like Ryan said, be a North Star, share what I did wrong and try and guide these kids to not make mistakes that, I may have made. And not just cycling guidance, but try and shape these kids into really good people. And I'd like to really highlight that in what we do on DC Devo is, shaping kids into being quality adults. And I really like to see that these graduating classes we have, not everyone goes on continuing cycling, go off to college, whatever, move on in life to something new. And just seeing the good people we're growing out of the sport is really cool.
Yeah. And I got to echo that. I mean, I think when I'm at the races and observing other teams, bigger teams, smaller teams, it's the quality of our kids, the quality of the people of our kids, it's super high. I actually enjoy hanging out with who they are because they're funny, they're smart, they can break down a race, they care about stuff, as opposed to just some jokesters out there that can still be in the junior world. So I think you guys have done a fantastic job of not only creating success on the team, but also just creating an environment to grow good people. And I think that that's a huge part of a developmental program, because you want people that are, helping them become better people. You want directors that are helping them become, so that whatever we learn in sport, we can bridge over to the rest of life. As we are kind of poking around here, we'll get into the questions. And since I had Chris queued up for that first big picture of sorts, I'll come back to Mauch for this first question. And all three of these questions, by the way, for our audience members, are coming from you. So you have written in, you've asked about junior development, junior coaching, and how does it work. So this first one is, I'll just read the original question and I'll have Mauch start to answer it, and I will chime in here too, because there's some coaching stuff on it. So first question is, can you talk about the specifics of coaching young athletes? We know younger athletes need more variety for proper athletic development, and it should be fun and social. When all of that is done right, there must be a physiological driven part of coaching structure for proper development into a better racer. It would be interesting to hear from you about this topic. Cheers, Tonko. So, Mauch, when I kind of read that question about coaching young athletes, need for variety, and some of the physiological aspects that drive that development, where do you want to start on answering that?
From my perspective, the importance, like in the question, is the variety. In coaching a young athlete, the motivation has to be coming from themselves. It can't be from their parents. It can't be from their coach. It can't be from their team. The motivation, if it's coming from those sources, this rider's either quitting cycling while they're still a junior, or as soon as they're done as a junior, is quitting cycling. The sport is far too hard. Far too many days where you're like, off the back, you've flatted out of a race, you've crashed out of a race, pouring rain, weather's awful, you're heading out training, you're just going to quit. So motivation has to come within. But another part of that question is like the healthy movement outside of just, going and pedaling your bike for zone 2 consistency, like go do long training hours. But the core work, making sure you're stretching and doing those things, as well as not just being only a road rider. I think it's good. A lot of our riders do cyclocross in the winter, and what that does for your body, and like running, toughens your bones and just makes you stronger across the board. It's not just about pedaling.
Fully agree with that. And I think to touch on some of those points, I think depends on how young they actually are, because Chris, remind me, what are the ages that we start taking on athletes on DC Devo? 15. So some of the riders, I think the youngest was Ethan. I think I started talking to him when I was like 12, right? What I told his dad was, listen, I'll talk to him once in a while, but I'm not even going to write a training program, because I want him playing basketball. I want him riding his bike, his mountain bike, all the bikes, right? And volume's going to keep low and just do other stuff. And that was the approach for the first probably year and a half. And then we stepped up the volume a little bit and started to ride the bike more, get into races, focus on fun for the races, and then keep on doing other stuff, playing basketball, playing soccer, doing that kind of thing. And so Lydia as well, Lydia Cusack, she was a soccer player before she started to do bikes more full-time. And I was encouraging her, along with her parents, to just keep on doing soccer as long as it was fun. Just keep on going with it. Just keep on playing different sports, because that diversity of movement patterns for kids and motor skill development of all the things is really important down the road. Because whether they are, go on and race cyclocross or just road or mountain bike, but reaction times and bone structure and full range of motion, this is what we want. So I think in terms of that structure, what I can say is like, keep them moving, keep them doing things when they're young, up to maybe like 16, then 17, where they can start to specialize a little bit more. But this is what I was saying in the introduction is, for 14, 15, 16-year-olds, they kind of follow what I see as a time-crunched cyclist sort of pattern. They're doing volumes that are maybe 6 to 10 hours a week, oftentimes, right? And they're not going super epic. They're not going super long up until their bodies can tolerate it. And in that way, then what we're working on is the process, the fun, like bouncing, making training sessions that are more skill-based, more fun-based, doing, circle of death and some of these other like skills on the bike versus just chasing volume.
Observing junior cycling and the development of junior cycling and from all the teams that we've been involved in, and then seeing what they're doing in Europe, I think that's true. I think there's a balance though, because if you're looking to get to the level where you can race successfully at 17, 18, where you're trying to make national team at 17, 18, really, this is going to depend on the type of rider and what their ambitions are. I mean, there's some juniors who just want to have a good time in the sport, and that's totally great. If they're aiming to get to the level where they're going to race on like the national team, or they're going to be a contender at nationals, the volume that I've seen for a lot of riders increases significantly after like around 15 years old. And then it's a challenge. Like the best riders are the riders that we have to hold back. And I'm sure like that's your experience as a coach, like ones who are like, looking at the volume or some of the rides that these young like girls like Alyssa and like Lydia would do. They would just go out and do monster rides. I don't know what their total volume is. They would do early on. They were doing gravel races that were long and hard with like men at high speeds. They were winning the Monster Cross gravel race, which is a 3-hour long race. Like that's the level that they were at when they were 15 years old. Like they won that race in the pro women when they were 15, right? So riders can't think that they're going to be able to do all the sports and not ride and compete against somebody like that. It's not going to happen. So then it becomes, one way to avoid like just always riding, doing one thing is what you're saying is they all did different things on the bike. They're mountain biking, they're cyclocross, they're gravel racing, they're road racing, and they're getting in a lot of the variety that way when they are forced to make a decision to stop doing other sports. Like Alyssa was a top ski racer. So was Catherine Sarkisov. Lydia was a great soccer player. Cora is a great soccer player. Ultimately, they have to become bike racers, right? That's just the unfortunate fact that parents, I think, have to understand, because there are too many good juniors, like the top juniors now that are going to like the 17-year-old like boys that these guys you're going to face off against. They're going to pro teams in Europe, right? The top, I'm talking about like the top 4 or 5 in the US. It's not as deep here, but those are the ones who are going to be dictating the speed of the race. So like these 17-year-olds are going to go into a race that's going to be run at a much faster pace than a pro 1-2 race and with men or women. So there has to be that sense of realism from the parents and from the riders about what they're kind of getting themselves into. And then it's a tricky balance that coaches like yourself and others have to manage. Like you have to do enough, but you don't want to burn out somebody young. And we've seen that happen with lots of riders, sometimes of their own motivation. They're just out there just grinding away all the time because they're self-motivated, but ultimately it's just too much, and they need to be held back. So it's it's a hard sport that requires a lot of training. And it's not like other sports where you can really afford to do a bunch of different things, like different ball sports. Like you have people who are good at football, good at this or good at that. If you're going to be a cyclist, you're going to be a cyclist. I think that's my view. Maybe some of you would disagree. And I guess it's the question of what age you start doing that. Because obviously there's some top riders we've heard about, like Remco and others, who they have the ability and they jump into the sport when they're 17, coming from other sports and dominate. But that's so far outside the norm that if you do that norm, in the usual course, and you show up at a 17, 18 race, you're just going to get blown out, so.
Yeah. And I think too, you hit the nail on the head. It depends on that age. And what's tricky about juniors is their growth rate and their rate of development is all over the place. When we're talking the kind of that 13 to 16, a lot happens there. And so like ballpark here, like 13 to 14-year-olds, generally maybe 200, 250 hours a year. And that's like maybe 6 hours of training, but you go up to 15, 16. Now all of a sudden we're like 300, 400 hours of training, right? And then all of a sudden that's like the determiner or decision point of, okay, are we going to take this to the next level and grow bigger? And then what I would do is I'd take that individual athlete and try to grow the total annual hours by 10 to 15% each year. So then you move up to like that 600, maybe 600 hours for a 17-year-old and going up to potentially 800 hours for an 18-year-old, if they've chosen that path and if they have been racing and doing something on a bike since age 10, which some of these riders that we're talking about have, and 800 hours is a lot of freaking training. So we're all over the place with like this general ballpark of, competing to get the participation trophy to getting serious to elite. But I think what's so interesting, fascinating, and rewarding about this age group is stuff happens so quickly, and their dose response to training is very different than us middle-aged folk who are all talking on this podcast right now.
Because those changes happen so quickly, you can't make anything of either your success or failure at a young age. Like when you're 13 or 14 versus even when you're 15, you see all the time these riders who are winning races when they're 13 and 14. It's just because they're developmentally so much more advanced than, their peers. They've just grown faster. But then other riders catch up and everything flips around, and it's not sustainable. Yeah. So people need to be patient, and they need to focus on the training and just really liking to race and ride at that age, and not be put under any pressure by parents or anything else for like results, even up to 15, because then that's going to all flip around. Right. And sometimes these younger riders who are smaller riders who are like just trying to like hang in there with these bigger guys, they end up being strong because they build their resilience, and if they're not quitting and they're doing that, then those are people who could go on to become really good riders.
Completely agree. And so to Tonko, thank you for writing that in, because it's a very big question. I think we touched on a few of things, directly related to that. I take that individual approach. I kind of see like what other sports have they been doing, how long they've been riding, and then kind of grow them from there and be conservative, but also focus on the process, focus on the gamification of learning how to actually race. That's another huge component of it, of which we'll get into that maybe a little bit more in question 2. So I'm gonna kick it over to McKinney for this one, because we're the Time-Crunched Cyclists, Ryan. We got to keep going here.
That's right. Keep it going.
That's right. So here's the second question. This one's coming from Kim, and she says, my kids are 12 and 14, just getting into cycling and curious about racing. I know you coach junior athletes. How do we find a good junior program? What should we look for in a program? And when should they start racing? Anything else I should think about? Sorry, I'm new to this whole thing. Thanks, and any advice is appreciated. Kim. All right, Ryan.
Yeah. Kim, first of all, it's a blessing if your children are at all interested in cycling anyway. So yeah, knowing where to take that interest and that curiosity is so important. And it really, in my experience, it depends on a lot of different things. What is doable for you and your family? Like how far are you willing to go to make this interest in cycling possible for your children? So the first thing to do is see if there's any information at your local bike shop is a great place to start. The next place to look would be any junior programs, like NICA is a great school-based program for mountain biking. The next thing to do is look at local cycling clubs, depending on where you are in the country. As far as what you should look for in a program, the first one is one that is fun and interesting and inviting, and one that wants to help your child or children learn how to be safe on a bike, how to ride within a group in a safe way, and build camaraderie and community while doing those things. And then once that kind of foundation is established, then you can start thinking like, okay, my child knows how to ride safely on their bike. They know how to ride in a group. And then you can say like, okay, racing, that's a thing. And I don't want to say like that's the only route, because there are different types of racing. What I was just talking about was mostly road racing, but a great way, if your child is just interested in what a race might feel like, is trying out mountain biking or cyclocross racing. And here in our community in the Mid-Atlantic, we have just this amazing cyclocross community that embraces the junior programs in this area. It's just it's like the big funnel into cycling in this area. Cyclocross racing is mostly done on in parks. So it's a fully closed course. So it's super safe for the racers, but it also demands a lot of the riders. It teaches them incredible bike handling skills. It teaches them when to put a lot of power into their pedaling and when to be in a state of finesse where they're having to kind of move their way through technical obstacles. They're going to have to get off their bike and run. So it's a great avenue into cycling. It's super fun experience. And then as far as anything else to think about, if I was a parent who had children interested in cycling, I would caution you to just understand that the sport is, as Chris and Adam and Justin have said, it's a really tough sport, and that motivation piece that was referred to earlier is really important. This is not a sport that parents can say, you're going to be a cyclist and here you go, like go get after it, because it's a grueling, brutal sport. And if the motivation is coming from anywhere other than the child, it's not going to be sustainable. All that said, it is a wonderful, awesome community where people, push each other to limits they didn't know they could reach. And, that's the really great side of it.
Yeah, that is an all-encompassing answer. And one thing I'll add to that is in my intro, I said, this thing takes a village, like developing an athlete from, super young up until if they go elite and all that kind of stuff. And in that village, it's the parents first and foremost, because they're getting them to the races and they're taking huge polls, but then it's directors and coaches and guidance counselors like you that are doing huge efforts at the races themselves. So I think, to the Ryan's point, Kim, it's like look for a dynamic, communicative, open-minded group like these three here. And one of the ways is just like get to the races, get some of those exposures, and organically, that's a really great way to do it. To you, Chris, because you are kind of like, whenever I have a question, I reach out to you and you always have an answer. But is there like a club finder sort of website on like USA Cycling or anything from a website that somebody could just Google?
I believe USA Cycling's website has a list of what they call the Centers for Excellence. We're one of those, but there are lots of junior programs around the country that have that label, there's so many great junior programs, and most of them focus on cyclocross, and then they're also mountain bike programs. And I fully agree that that's where to start as a junior. Cyclocross, it's so much fun. The kids like it. They train together in a park a couple of days, a week. It's super great, and it's a type of event where you can race it really hard, but you can also just go out there and just give it your best shot. Everybody has a good time. Different kids are after different things. Some are just really trying to go out there and just hammer everybody. Others are trying to go out there, and the courses are super fun, obstacle courses, and mountain biking is the same way. So it's competitive, but it's not competitive like in road racing. Road racing, you're either in the race or you're kind of out the back, and it's kind of either or, and it can be demoralizing. And it's also the other events, as Ryan was saying, that they're technical, but they're at much slower speeds, so they're much safer. You don't have the issues that you do on the road. But there are many, many clubs in the DC area. Our club wouldn't exist without Rock Creek Velo, or now BYC we're getting riders from, and we've all benefited from that. And it's a huge, awesome program. They take the kids out on the road. It's been a project of some really awesome parents that have stuck with it over the years, and have cycled through there. My son went through that. All of our top riders, Sarkisovs, Cusacks, everybody came out of Rock Creek Velo. It's the same with Boulder Junior Cycling out in Boulder, and there's some other programs like that up in the Midwest. There's some really big programs. So you can find these by going to the USA Cycling website, or also just Googling, junior cycling clubs, and there's going to be a great program in your area if you're in a fairly populated area. And then the NICA mountain biking series for middle schools and high schools, that's the biggest, most successful junior development program right now in the United States. They have huge turnout, and those races they're super fun. Kids are out there having a great time, just hanging out with their friends. And you also have some super high level racing going on, and kids who go from that to like national level competition. riders like Kate Courtney, other top riders have come out of these programs. So that's like a real bright spot in U.S. cycling.
No, that is great. And Kim, super good question. Tons of resources out there. Google it, go to USA Cycling, and heck, if you can't find anything, reach out to me, and we'll likely just reach out to Chris Hardee and find something that fits for you as well. So moving on to the third question, which is, this is also a very good question and hits on like a really unique aspect of our sport. And I want everybody to chime in on this one. And I'll start with you, Mauch. But because racing as a junior and kind of like catting up as you go, I think this pertains. So here's the original question. My kids are racing as juniors and the team they're on encourages riding and racing with grown adults. Is this normal? Shouldn't kids just race kids? I know you've mentioned working with juniors in the past, so please shed some light on this, or maybe I just need to relax if this is how it's done. My kids are 15 and 16. Thanks, Robert. So, Mauch, is that a normal aspect of the sport, and why is it?
You're not going to be able to have juniors ride together every, day of the week. Our juniors are kind of spread out across the area. It's not football practice. It's not, 5 nights a week. Football practice with all your teammates. Right. It's not that. I lived out in Northern Virginia. There's no way I'd be getting into DC to do these RCV group rides. So the local group ride I was doing was the Reston Bike Club. I was the only junior. So totally normal.
How did you identify that group ride was appropriate for you? Like speed-wise, group-wise, safety-wise, like how is that done?
It's probably my coach telling me to go do the group ride. My coach knew about the ride. I was on NCVC as a junior. We had the NCVC adult team too. So you kind of mix and mingle with those riders and find mentors.
There's lots of different types of group rides. Some are less safe than others. Some are more mellow. So you can inquire in the community about which ones to start out with if you have a junior. It's very important because, as Justin was saying, the juniors, there are not enough juniors for juniors to ride together, and also there are not enough juniors for juniors to race together, except for at the big national events. So to learn to race a bike, you're going to have to race with men. That's just the fact. And those races, unfortunately, like at the beginner levels, are not entirely safe. That's an aspect of the sport that, parents and riders have to figure out, like what they want to do. And that's going to go back to what we were talking about earlier, what is the objective of the rider. And if you don't want to do that, stick with cyclocross and mountain biking. And then if you get strong enough and you're older, then you want to jump into that. If they really want to be successful on the road, all of our riders were racing and doing well in men's racing when they were like 15 years old. Like our girls were winning, all the women's races when they were that age.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's common for girls to jump in the threes with the men and race.
Our girls, when they were 16, were racing in men's 3 races, right? That's how crazy talented they are. And we would encourage that. We talked to them. I remember talking to their parents, like, this is what they got to do because the women's field is too small and it's not competitive enough for them. They need to build the speed because what they were looking to build to is racing in Europe, where you're going to be racing in fields of very fast girls, but where you have 90 in the field. And if you're racing in a field of like 15 or 20 and you're by far the strongest rider, you might as well be out riding by yourself. And that's kind of was their experience often when racing in the women's fields. They need to ride in a race that's got a lot of dynamics, a lot of attacking, recovery, managing your bike. And now they're great bike handlers. They can manage a field. If riders want to develop now, they have to be aiming to get up into the men's races. And we were like trying to get our 15, 16s, get to be a Cat 3, race in the men's Cat 3 races, start doing well in those, podium in the men's Cat 3. By the time you're 17, Cat 2, and on up, right? And then because that's the level of riders that they're racing against, if they really want to do well at nationals, or if they want to try to get on like the national team, because those guys are all like Cat 1s by the time they're 18.
I think from Robert's point of view, here in the United States, it is unusual for children in sports to be competing against adults. So, Robert, I hear you, but cycling is such a unique kind of group, and also the physics of the sport make it so that we can compete against each other at different age groups. So it seems strange, but it does make a lot of sense.
It's a function of the numbers or the lack of numbers for the juniors in the United States. In Europe, In Belgium, it's not permitted for juniors to race with adults, right? They have 15, 16 categories and they race together. They don't race up even with the 17, 18s. 17s, 18s race together, and they can't race U23 or elites. But they have 80 to 90 kids in each of those categories in those races, and those races are super competitive. Here, there's just not enough juniors unless you go to the big race, like the 3 or 4 or 5 in the country, Nationals, Valley of the Sun, the Lago Vista in Texas and others, where you're going to get field sizes where you can actually learn the sport. So it's just a function of bike racing in the United States compared to Europe.
Yeah, and that was the main point I was hoping we'd hammer out is exactly that, Chris. But I think to McKinney's point, the way we do it or the way our culture does it in the United States is drastically different than Europe. But there's also some beauty behind that too, because I think the sport of cycling itself has this like accessibility to it. I think that there's a lot of beauty behind that too, and so I think you lean into that. But yeah, Robert, it's weird, but it's also really cool because we're open to having these age categories like get those experiences so they can increase, up in category and get more high level competitions and stuff. But Ryan, lastly to you, I mean, is that the way it was when you were a junior climbing the ranks as well?
Absolutely. That's all. In fact, there was very little support in the Mid-Atlantic area for junior cyclists when I was young. And I'm sure Chris probably feels the same way, but that's all I did. The only junior races I did was when there was, the big national events, and that was it. Other than that, there was a junior category here, but it had maybe 6 or 7 riders, so it wasn't even worth really participating in.
And so I think with all that being said, I mean, it's with what we're doing, like on the DC Devo Race Academy, I mean, it is, in my opinion, very special. But I'm close to the sport. I'm in it. Juniors are both like frustrating and rewarding all at the same time to coach, and I absolutely love it. So here's the shameless plug. If people are like, you know what, I really love bikes and I want to support, like if they want to support DC Devo as like an individual club, Chris, how would they do that? And also like big picture here, what else could listeners do to ensure that the future of the sport is successful and has these opportunities long term to keep on racing up, take it to the next level if that's what they want to do, or just have be in love with bikes for longevity?
I think the main thing they can do to make the sport successful would, if they have kids that are interested in the sport, or if they want to introduce their kids to it, just to find some of these really great grassroots programs and help keep those programs going and support those programs. I think those are extremely important, contribute to NICA. And then for programs like ours, where we exist to provide a platform for that next level of talented riders who want to race nationally and internationally. We depend on those programs. I mean, we do our fundraising through, largely supported by the DC Velo generous members on the team who have been super supportive of the program over the years, and we do some fundraising on Facebook and Instagram.
One thing I'd add to that, Chris, is if you're someone who has experience that happens to be listening to this, came up through the ranks, it's not just money, it's time. This team, like if it wasn't for the three of us and Adam too subbing in, the time is a really hard thing. We're all, busy people with things in our life. But I do think that the juniors find it valuable for us to be there and be supporting and like giving our knowledge. So, and it feels really good when I am able to make the time to go be at the races. So time, if you're someone that thinks could help, find a local program and ask like, hey, do you guys need, an extra hand?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is one quick story of just like our national championships a few weeks ago here. And this, to pull the veil back on how some of this works, is like we had a meeting on Zoom before that McKinney was leading, right? All the riders jumped on, we jumped on, we had a game plan for the race itself. Hardee got there for the time trial because the rest of us weren't there yet. We couldn't make it because we were doing our other jobs. And Hardee basically high fives Mauch, who comes in and takes the reign for like the the crit, and I met him for the crits and then the road race. Mauch goes to a wedding after the crits, and he comes back like in time. And then I had to take the boys because that was like the early race. I high five him. He takes the girls for the road race that day, and like we just make it work. And so there's no like super magic recipe. We're not a high budget team, but like we make it work, and you keep it chill for the riders so that they can focus on their performance. And that passion and that time is probably more valuable than the money itself, even though you need the money to fund the thing. So Mauch, I mean, kudos for saying that. If you have that expertise and you have time available, it goes a long way, because kids will remember that forever.
It really is about cultivating a fun, supportive environment for young people who have an interest and a drive to do something that is physically, mentally, emotionally challenging, and helping them reach new heights. And then when that support leads to successes, it really is just a feeling that you can't get from any other effort. And so just a really, really fantastic experience to grow with these young people and their families into, a sport that we all love. And that's what this is all about.
All right, last little bit, and then we'll wrap up. If someone hears this and they're in the Mid-Atlantic region, Chris, how does it work if they want to get their kid involved and they're 15 years old? What do they do?
I mean, they could reach out to us on our, DM us on our Instagram page at DC Devo Racing Academy. And yeah, that's probably the best way. And we respond. I just got an inquiry from someone today who is interested.
Yeah. And I'll add in, I mean, we've got a rider from Montana, right, too. So it doesn't even have to be our region itself, because we do get to bigger national races and then partner with USA Cycling to get to international stuff. Well, gentlemen, I thank you so much for your time. We will get this out to the masses, and I do think our audience members, at least the ones who wrote in, but those who are hanging on and still listening to us go along, hopefully you learn something. If a junior shows up to your race or your group ride, it's not that abnormal, especially here in the United States. So lean in, help the kid if you've got some of that expertise, and let them go and grow into that next future generation. So to you guys, thank you for everything, including all your efforts on this program. It is absolutely fun to be just a little spoke in this wheel. So thanks
for putting this on.
Yeah, thank you.